Well, that was more of the same, but somehow different. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be reviewing Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, Book 2 in Mistborn Era 2. This is the follow-up to The Alloy of Law. I did do a review for that pretty recently, and just to give some of my overall thoughts on this book, I did give it a 4-star, which means I really liked it. And I think maybe part of that ranking was just kind of carried on. I read this pretty much back to back with The Alloy of Law. And I think maybe some of that ranking is still just like the nostalgia of being back in the Mistborn world. And that's definitely part of it. And that might mean this is a book that ends up being ranked a little bit lower. Normally what I do is I have two spreadsheets. I have like an overall master spreadsheet and I have one for every year. And for the yearly one, I don't really move the books, my ratings around for books on those, but on like my master spreadsheet, I will. And I could definitely see this and Alloy of Law being books that end up getting bumped down to a 3-star. And part of that is I really feel like these are two books that should have been smashed together. And I normally don't do this. I try to avoid doing research on books and like looking too much into them because I like to just kind of experience the books. I normally don't watch a review for a book until I'm done with it. And unfortunately, I just felt like something was different about this series. And so I ended up doing some research and finding out that originally this wasn't going to be a series at all. This kind of Era 2 was just going to be some short stories that Sanderson had that took place in between this and what is going to be Mistborn Era 3, which is supposed to be set in like the 1980s. And I definitely feel that definitely in these first two books. I did some math. I think the first book was 330 pages and this one was like a little bit longer, like 380 or something like that. So if you had just smashed these two books together, it would be like not a short book, but not like a super long book either for Sanderson's track record. And I really feel like both of these stories would have benefited from it. I think there are some things from the first book and the second book where if you just kind of changed the order of kind of how things are introduced or how they flow together, that you would have gotten a really good one book. And I really think that this series kind of is missing that. They feel small and not insignificant, but I'm still trying to see what the bigger picture is going to be. And we get some of that definitely in Shadows of Self, but to me, just kind of my overall thoughts are The Alloy of Law and Shadows of Self should really just kind of have been combined into one much longer book. And I think maybe part of that is Sanderson didn't have maybe his normal clear thought of where this series was going to go at the time he started writing some of these. So they kind of evolved from those short stories into fuller length novels. And I don't know, if I ever get the chance to ask Sanderson, maybe that's something I could ask him, if he could go back in time, if maybe he would kind of combine those books. And I think he could without even changing like some really major plot points. I really think he could just kind of maneuver character introductions, character paths, where it would all flow together and just work. So that all being said, I'll go ahead and talk more specifically about what I liked and what I didn't like about the Shadows of Self. So let's go ahead and start off with what I hear the most about this series in Era 2, and that is the humor. And that's going to go into the likes for me this time around, specifically when it's Wayne and somebody else. When Wayne is kind of alone and doing his own kind of thing where he's kind of being funny by himself, that I didn't enjoy as much, but specifically him and Milan and Marcy and all of them, when he's with them kind of like being very playful and everything like that, I enjoy that a lot more. I think he is definitely a much more complex character than we get, and I'd like to explore that a little bit more, but yeah, his humor, and I can definitely see why some people do not like it. I could see how honestly, Wayne's humor just absolutely destroys people's enjoyment of Mistborn Era 2. But thankfully, I am not one of those people. And overall, it's a little silly sometimes. I have literally rolled my eyes, just like, oh my gosh, is this really what's happening right now? But I think the tone of this series is supposed to be a little bit more like that. And I think that also goes back to what I mentioned earlier with these were kind of short stories to begin with, where some of that more lighthearted humor works better. And without this being some like giant epic. So yeah, that is going to be a like for me. I'm kind of surprised. I was iffy on it in the first one. I think in my Alloy of Law review, I actually had it in my negatives, but I guess it has just grown on me. We'll see if it continues to grow on me or if it kind of beats me down and I get over it at some point. The next thing I want to mention is it's kind of a spoiler, so I had to be a little bit vague, but some of the destabilization we see, I think is the best way to say it, that some certain characters are able to cause because they have practice. I found it really interesting on kind of a political maneuvering side of how easy it would be to bring and sow so much chaos and resentment inside of a populace. And I think that's one of the questions that this book in particular is asking. It definitely is dealing with corruption and those kinds of things. And I found that really fascinating. I don't know how much more that will be explored going forward. It's something I would like to see, just the political maneuvering. It's not maneuvering, but some of this, like the larger political stuff that's going on, because, you know, this is humanity starting again from Mistborn Era 1. And obviously it's not being stifled by the Lord Ruler, so we're seeing these technological advancements and everything, but it's still very self-contained. So seeing humanity expand is something I'm really interested in. And politics, unfortunately, is always something when you start to get large groups of people that come into play. I mean, you see it everywhere from like HOAs, school boards, like PTA, PTA groups. Like the more people you start to get, the more political backstabbing-y kind of things we see. And so as humanity in this world is kind of expanding and growing, I really like seeing that. And so that was a real positive to see how outside forces were able to sow chaos and make things less than ideal is a pretty nice way of saying it. That also kind of goes into with the next thing I liked, and that is there is some stuff coming over from Mistborn Era 1 into Era 2 that I'm really happy to see, and I'm hoping we maybe get some more of that. I think Era 1 is so important and so beloved that this series, using that as nostalgia bait, and not even nostalgia bait, but somehow incorporating those things that I really liked from Era 1 into Era 2, it slowly is happening here in Shadows of Self, and I'm hoping moving forward it happens even more. And I'm being vague because I don't really want to spoil it, even though it's not the biggest spoiler. But yeah, overall, just pulling in some of the creatures and things from Era 1 into Era 2 is something I've really enjoyed, and really hope that we progress even more with that. And in the same vein, the last positive I'm going to mention here is Wax's interactions with a specific character. And I'm going to leave it vague because I don't want to spoil anything. But there's definitely some like otherworldly kind of interaction. I don't know the best way to say it, but the interaction between those two characters was just great. There's definitely some questioning of free will versus predestination kind of stuff going on. And those philosophical debates are something I enjoy when they're not too deep and you know, anything too crazy. Some of that stuff ends up going over my head anyway. I like to try to involve myself in those kinds of things, but I'm not nearly smart enough to to be involved in that. But that is my last positive. That character action just, I don't know, just kind of scratched an itch that I didn't even know I had, that I kind of wanted to see. And it's also just an interesting angle that Mistborn Era 2 is asking, especially compared to Era 1. Now, switching over to my dislikes. The first one I'm going to mention, and it has to be vague as well, to be spoiler free, but there is a reveal made about a certain character. And for whatever reason, it just did not work for me. It just felt really wrong. And maybe it's supposed to. And the character reactions we get to it almost lead me to believe that we're kind of supposed to feel that way. We're supposed to kind of feel betrayed, lied to, just, I don't know. It felt dirty and wrong. And I don't know why I felt so strongly that way. And like I said, maybe this should be in the positive, because maybe that is what Sanderson's going for. He wants you to feel that way, and if that's the case, it's done super, super well. But that doesn't change it that in the moment I hated it. Or I didn't hate it, but I was just like, man, that just sucks. That reveal, like the revelation itself, it's like, oh man, that sucks. That is rough. And yeah, so I don't know. I guess it's not something I needed. It's not a thread that I needed to get explored that way. So, and it kind of goes back to the predestination versus free will kind of thing, but I don't know, that it didn't work for me. And the next thing is this weird love triangle we have going on between Wax and the sisters. man, this will they, won't they, is he gonna just marry one because he's supposed to, but he really loves the other one? I don't need that. I do not need weird love triangle-y stuff. Just, I don't know. I don't know what's really gonna happen with it. I have a hope that he in my mind, does the right thing and develops feelings for the one he's supposed to marry. I don't know if that's really gonna happen. But the other way around, I don't know. I need something to be resolved here sooner than later, because this is one of those tropes that can really drag down books for me. And I'm normally not the kind of person who's against a romance. A good romance in a book is actually something I love. Some of my favorite books have they're rarely romance heavy, and that's not the problem. I don't mind romance itself, but these weird love triangle things, definitely a no-no for me. And once again, the last thing I'm going to bring up, and I said this in the Alloy of Law, is that this story and Alloy of Law itself so far feels so focused in Ellendale and so self-isolated, where I need to see what else is going on in the world. Is there anything going else in the world? And that's kind of the question I'm asking myself, is like, so when the end of Mistborn Era 1 happened and everything gets shifted around, is that everybody now? Or is there stuff out there? I need to explore at least the roughs. I would prefer even more. And so I don't know. And I think it goes back to what I said in the very beginning, that these were supposed to be just kind of short story novella, like filling in the gaps between Era 1 and what was supposed to be Era 2 that's now going to be Era 3. And I think that is just a symptom that these two books in particular have really suffered from. And I'm really hoping that in, the Bands of Mourning, we kind of move past that, we explore more. And that would be a really big positive for me, to just get outside of Ellendale a little bit, because we hear about the roughs, we hear about things that are going on outside and the broadsheets and stuff, but like, I want to be there, I want to see it, I want something to happen out there. I don't believe that we can just stay in this one city, even if it is like the pinnacle of where most people live and like this is the base of humanity. We know there's other stuff out there. So let's kind of like branch out and explore that a little bit. It's something I would really like to see. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Shadow of Self. If you have really strong feelings one way or another, definitely let me know down in the comments, and have a good one.